10 bizarre classic pickup trucks you've never seen before. Most pickup trucks follow a familiar formula: a long hood, a simple cab, and a cargo bed built purely for work. But throughout automotive history, a few engineers decided to ignore that formula completely. They built pickup trucks with engines in the rear, trucks where the driver sat almost directly above the front wheels. One pickup on this list doesn't even have side doors at all, and another looks so strange. Most people today assume it was only a concept car. But it wasn't. These trucks were real. They were built, and some of them were actually sold to customers. Today we're looking at 10 of the most bizarre classic pickup trucks ever created. Starting with a truck that tried to solve a problem no pickup had ever attempted to fix before. Ranked 10th, Chevrolet Corvair Rampside, 1961. At first glance, this pickup already looks unusual. Not because of the bed, not because of the cab, but because of what sits underneath it. Unlike most trucks of its era, the Chevrolet Corvair Rampside placed its engine in the rear. The same air-cooled flat six used in the Corvair passenger car. That decision created a strange layout. With no engine under the hood, the truck gained something unexpected along the side of the bed: a full-length loading ramp. Instead of lifting heavy cargo over the tailgate, the entire side panel could fold down, turning the bed into a low loading platform. Motorcycles, tool carts, small machinery, all could be rolled directly into the truck. It was one of the most practical pickup ideas of the early 1960s. And yet, the design disappeared after only a few years of production, because the next truck on this list didn't try to solve a problem at all. It simply ignored every design rule pickup trucks were supposed to follow. Ranked 9th, Jeep FC170, 1957. If the previous truck looked unusual because of what it could do, the next one looked strange before it even started moving. The Jeep FC170 followed a design philosophy known as forward control. Instead of placing the engine and hood in front of the driver, engineers pushed the entire cab forward, directly above the front axle, which meant the driver sat almost on top of the front wheels. From the outside, the truck looked almost square. Short nose, tall cabin, and a long, perfectly flat cargo bed stretching behind it. The design had a purpose. By eliminating the traditional hood, the truck could remain relatively compact while still carrying a much longer load. For farms, construction sites, and off-road work, that extra cargo space was valuable. But visually, the FC170 never looked like a normal pickup. It looked closer to a military transport vehicle than a civilian truck. And for many drivers in the 1950s, that unusual shape was simply too unfamiliar. Which brings us to the next truck. Because the vehicle coming up didn't just move the driver forward, it experimented with an entirely different idea of what a pickup truck could be. Ranked 8th, Ford Durango, 1981. The next vehicle on this list looked unusual for a different reason, not because of strange engineering, and not because of a radical design experiment, but because it tried to combine two types of vehicles that rarely existed together at the time. In the early 1980s, Ford was already selling the Bronco, a rugged SUV built for off-road use. But some buyers wanted something slightly different. They wanted the comfort of an SUV with the open cargo space of a pickup truck. So a small number of Ford dealers began offering something unusual: a modified Ford Fairmont wagon that had been converted into a compact pickup-style vehicle. It was called the Ford Durango. From the front, it looked like a normal passenger car. But behind the cabin, the rear section had been transformed into a small pickup bed. Today, that kind of crossover idea feels familiar. Modern vehicles like the Ford Maverick or Hyundai Santa Cruz follow a similar philosophy. But in 1981, the market simply wasn't ready. Production remained extremely limited, and the Durango quietly disappeared, which makes the next truck even more interesting. Because unlike the Durango, it didn't try to combine different categories. Instead, it tried to combine two completely different eras of design. Ranked 7th, Studebaker Coupe Express, 1937. By the late 1930s, most pickup trucks followed a simple philosophy: utility first, comfort later. They were square, rugged, and clearly built for work. But the Studebaker Coupe Express approached the pickup idea from a completely different direction. Instead of designing a truck from scratch, Studebaker started with something unexpected. A passenger car. The front half of the vehicle looked almost identical to a stylish two-door coupe of the era, complete with a long hood, flowing fenders, and the kind of body lines normally associated with personal automobiles. Only when you look behind the cabin did the design reveal its real purpose. Where the rear seats would normally sit, there was a pickup bed. The result was something that looked halfway between a luxury car and a work truck. At the time, the idea wasn't considered strange at all. In fact, it was marketed to buyers who wanted a truck that felt more refined than the typical farm vehicle. But today, looking back nearly a century later, the Coupe Express feels like an unusual hybrid from another timeline. A reminder that truck design hasn't always followed the same rules we expect today, and the next vehicle on this list pushed that idea even further. Ranked 6th, International Harvester Metro Pickup. By the middle of the 20th century, most pickup trucks had settled into a familiar shape: a long hood, a separate cab, and a cargo bed clearly divided from the rest of the vehicle. But the next truck on this list came from a company that approached vehicle design very differently. International Harvester wasn't primarily known for passenger vehicles. It built farm equipment, work trucks, and industrial machines. So when the company introduced the Metro series, the goal wasn't style, it was pure functionality. The Metro vehicles were originally designed as delivery vans, often used by bakeries, repair companies, and small businesses. But in some versions, the rear section of that van-like body was replaced with something unexpected: a pickup bed. The result was a truck that looked nothing like the pickups most people recognize. The front end was rounded and tall, with a flat face and large windshield. Instead of a long hood stretching forward, the driver sat much closer to the front of the vehicle. From the side, the truck looked almost like a delivery van that had been carefully sliced in half. It was practical, it was durable, and for certain types of work, it made perfect sense. But visually, the Metro pickup always felt like an outsider. A truck designed by people who cared far more about function than about fitting into traditional pickup styling. And the next vehicle on this list took a completely different approach, because instead of redesigning the front of the truck, it completely reimagined how the cargo bed itself could work. Ranked 5th, Volkswagen Type 2, single cab pickup. By the 1950s, most pickup trucks followed a predictable layout: engine in the front, cab in the middle, cargo bed behind it. But Volkswagen approached the idea of a work truck from a completely different direction. The Type 2 platform, better known as the Volkswagen Transporter, placed its engine in the rear. That alone already made the vehicle unusual. But the pickup version introduced something even more interesting. Instead of a fixed cargo bed with a single tailgate, the Type 2 single cab used what was called a drop-side bed. 3 sides of the bed could fold down. The rear gate opened like a traditional pickup, but both side panels could also drop completely flat. Suddenly, loading cargo didn't require lifting everything over tall bed walls. Crates, tools, and building materials could be slid directly onto the platform from almost any direction. For workers navigating tight city streets or crowded job sites, that flexibility was incredibly useful. And combined with the compact cab-forward layout, the truck could carry surprisingly large loads for its size. It was a clever piece of engineering, but compared to the bold shapes and aggressive designs many American pickup buyers preferred, the small Volkswagen work truck remains something of an unusual sight. Which brings us to the next vehicle. Because the truck coming up didn't look strange due to clever engineering. It looked strange because it was unexpectedly fast. Ranked 4th, Dodge Lil Red Express, 1978. Most pickup trucks in the 1970s were not designed for speed. They were built to haul equipment, carry lumber, and handle long days of work. Performance was never the priority. But Dodge decided to challenge that idea. In 1978, the company introduced a pickup that looked unlike anything else on American roads. It was called the Lil Red Express truck. The first thing people noticed wasn't the engine. It was the exhaust stacks. 2 tall chrome pipes rose behind the cab, just like the exhaust system on a full-size semi-truck. Combined with bright red paint and wooden bed panels, the truck looked almost theatrical. More like a showpiece than a work vehicle. But the real surprise was hidden under the hood. Powered by a high-output V8 and freed from some emissions restrictions that affected passenger cars at the time, the Lil Red Express delivered performance that shocked the automotive world. In fact, during its debut year, this pickup became one of the fastest American production vehicles available. Faster than many sports cars, faster than several muscle cars still on the market. For a brief moment in the late 1970s, a pickup truck had quietly become a performance icon, which made it unforgettable. But the next vehicle on this list pushed the idea of a strange pickup in a completely different direction. Because the truck coming up didn't focus on speed at all. Instead, it stunned people purely through its design. Ranked third, GMC Caballero Diablo. By the late 1970s and early 1980s, most pickup trucks still followed a familiar visual formula. Boxy body, large cargo bed, and a design focused almost entirely on utility. But occasionally, manufacturers experimented with something far more unusual. The GMC Caballero Diablo was one of those experiments. At its core, the Caballero already belonged to a strange category of vehicles. A hybrid often called a car-based pickup. It shared much of its structure with passenger cars rather than traditional trucks. But the Diablo version pushed that idea even further. Instead of looking like a work vehicle, the truck adopted styling cues normally seen on performance cars. The front end was low and aggressive. Body lines were sharper and more sculpted than most pickups of the era. And the overall shape made the vehicle look less like a farm truck and more like something designed for a showroom floor. To many people seeing it for the first time, the Caballero Diablo didn't even look like a pickup. It looked like a concept car that somehow escaped into production, and that unusual appearance is exactly what made it memorable. But even this strange design feels almost conventional compared to the next vehicle on the list, because the truck coming up barely resembles a pickup truck at all. In fact, when most people see it for the first time, they're not even sure what kind of vehicle it is supposed to be. Ranked second, Stout Scarab pickup conversion. By the time most people think about unusual pickup trucks, they imagine strange body shapes or experimental designs. But the next vehicle on this list is unusual for a very different reason. It wasn't originally a pickup truck at all. The story begins with the Stout Scarab, a vehicle introduced in the 1930s by aviation engineer William Bushnell Stout. At a time when most automobiles still followed the traditional long hood design, the Scarab looked radically different. Its body was tall and rounded. The front end was smooth and short, and the interior layout was surprisingly spacious, almost like a small moving room rather than a typical car. Many historians now consider the Scarab one of the earliest examples of what would later become the modern minivan concept. But somewhere along the way, a few of these unusual vehicles were modified in ways no one originally expected. Instead of keeping the enclosed passenger body, the rear section was removed and replaced with an open cargo area. The result was something extremely rare, a vehicle that combined the futuristic front half of the Scarab with the practical function of a pickup bed. The proportions were strange. The design looked almost experimental. And because so few of these conversions were ever created, very few people today have ever seen one in person, which makes it one of the most unusual pickup-like vehicles ever assembled. And yet, even this rare anomaly isn't the strangest design on this list, because the final truck coming up didn't simply modify an existing vehicle. In first place, Dodge Deora, 1967. Most pickup trucks are designed around a simple idea: a hood in the front, doors on the sides, and a cargo bed in the back. The Dodge Deora ignored nearly all of those conventions. When the truck first appeared in 1967, it looked less like a working vehicle and more like something from a science fiction film. The body sat extremely low to the ground. The roofline flowed smoothly from front to back, and the entire front end looked unusually clean, almost as if something was missing, because something actually was. The Deora had no side doors. Instead of opening the cabin from the sides like a normal vehicle, the designers created a completely different entry system. The entire windshield tilted forward, and built into the front bumper were two small steps that allowed the driver and passenger to climb up and enter the cabin from the front. It was an idea that looked incredibly futuristic for the 1960s. Inside, the truck featured a custom interior and a highly stylized dashboard, reinforcing the sense that this wasn't just a pickup truck. It was a design experiment pushing the boundaries of what trucks could look like. The Deora itself began life as a Dodge A100 pickup before being transformed by custom builders Mike and Larry Alexander for the Detroit Autorama show. And once people saw it, the reaction was immediate. The truck won multiple design awards and quickly became one of the most recognizable custom vehicles of its era. Even today, nearly 6 decades later, the Deora still feels like a pickup from another timeline. A reminder that sometimes the most memorable trucks in history aren't the biggest or the most powerful. They're the ones bold enough to ask a simple question: what if a truck didn't have to look like a truck at all? Pickup trucks are usually seen as simple machines, strong frames, reliable engines, and designs focused almost entirely on getting work done. But as this list shows, the history of pickup trucks isn't always simple. Every once in a while, engineers decide to experiment. Sometimes the results disappear. Sometimes they become legends. And sometimes they leave behind vehicles so unusual, people today aren't even sure they were real. So now we're curious, which of these bizarre pickup trucks surprised you the most? And are there any strange classic trucks you think should have made this list? Let us know in the comments.